best thing ever. Oh my God, you didn't record me singing. Right, let's
No, I
turn
didn't
this.
record you singing. I just recorded us laughing. Welcome to the post ILTACON edition of Charting Change in Legal. I'm Ari Kaplan, an analyst that covers legal, and I'm here with my dear friend.
Caroline Hill, editor-in-chief of Legal IT Insider. Hey, everyone. Great to see you. Great to hear you. Great to be with you. Great to see you, Ari.
Yeah, really nice to see you. Fun to see you at ILTACON, and just amazing to see all three of our listeners. It was a special event, and actually, no, it was a really a fun conference, and I was, send my congratulations, of course, to Joy Heath Rush and her team, who really put on an ILTACON for the ages, I would say. I just have heard only extraordinary feedback, and the content was focused and practical, and I really thought the venue was great, the weather was great. I just don't I left thinking, wow, what a great use of my time, and
Yeah.
what an excellent event.
So I think it was my favorite one ever. It was, and I think that also I wrote a piece about it. Like the venue was a challenge, I think, for everybody. So this was probably the biggest hotel I've ever stayed in, the hotel in Nashville, the Gaylord Opry. Um, I was lost for 2 days, but then once I got my bearings and also realized that I had to leave at least 20 minutes to find anywhere, it was better. But yeah, I think it was my favorite, and I think a lot of that is to do with it was a great venue, but also I think just this whole I described it as people being emotionally available, physically and emotionally available. So the venue really helped because everybody's in one place rather than distributed all over the place. So that really helps. And then also, I think just because there's so much going on in the industry, and it's almost like the speed of change. This is my assessment. I'd be interested to know whether you disagree. But the speed of change means that more than ever we're looking to each other for conversation and for exchanges and for validation or whatever it might be. So I think actually that really helped as well.
Yeah, I actually received follow-up notes from people who I don't typically do kind of a recap with after an event, who said, I'd love to hear what you thought, what you saw, and would be interested to figure out what were your top takeaways. And I was very lucky, I have to say, at this particular event, because I was fortunate to speak on two sessions. Normally, I don't speak on two sessions. One was an ILTA session, and one was a fortunate opportunity to connect with the folks at ShareFile to talk about reimagining legal workflow. And the other one was really about connecting case management to e-discovery, which tend to be unique disciplines and processes, but are closely connected. And I think that a lot of the discussions were very much about how do we bridge one thing to another? How do we create a fully aligned process? And in those sessions and in other conversations that I had, I felt like people were really there to solve problems. They have figured out, they've finally identified and listed out all the different problems and are figuring out either how they can come up with a new solution or how they can take what they're already doing and apply it downstream or upstream, and figure out how they can take certain talents and apply those to emerging issues and challenges. It was really fun, like a fun and creative series of conversations.
It's interesting. Yeah, I agree. And I thought there were lots of examples of when you compare it to last year, there obviously as you would expect, there was a maturity. There were a lot of new releases, as there always are around ILTACON. You could see that they're more mature. There's some quite interesting developments in the document management space where people are now able to use Gen AI tools to search their DMS, which I thought was really interesting. That's something that's been waited for a long time in this Gen AI world anyway. Not really that long, but a long time. It's been on the list. There was some good examples of that. And also there's some really cool stuff going on in finance around using Gen AI to help with billing narratives, all these kind of really specific use cases where we're seeing real world solutions. But there were also some big announcements around Gen AI assistance of things that are not available yet. I think that's still something that we're seeing quite a lot, where these tools are being announced and they're not available yet. There was also quite a few people that they don't have budget. It's interesting. And then the other thing that interesting conversation I had was around are people really using it? That seemed to be the sort of and in a piece I wrote after the conference, I was saying we need to be careful not to use ILTA as a kind of echo chamber. Sort of, oh, I don't think anyone's really doing anything cool, do you? Like, oh, you're not doing anything, I'm not doing anything. I think we need to be really aware of, because there are people doing some interesting stuff. It's hard to gauge what's real and what's talk sometimes. I don't know if you feel the same, but I've spoken to people who are doing some cool stuff. But so yeah, it was still this really interesting time in terms of people trying to assess where other people are at.
Well, last summer, I do this annual general counsel report every summer and ask law department leaders around the world about trends, risks, and opportunities. And Gen AI was obviously the topic of conversation last summer. And then I would speak to some of them in the fall, different groups. And I was often giving them grace to know that, or just based on my research, suggesting that they weren't as far behind as they were worried that they might be. And this year, I think that now that I'm having these conversations again, and based on what you just talked about, and my conversations at ILTA and other events that I've been to over the summer, I feel like doing absolutely nothing is not the reality anymore. That everyone is trying to figure out what they're doing, that law departments are working with their law firms are working with their vendors. There's a real collaboration for people to try to move quickly and not waste time, although not to be impatient. And I think that was sort of if I were to frame it that way, I'd say that people are interested in being smart about their progress. I don't know that they're feeling extreme pressure to take action, but certainly they recognize some action has to be taken. And I think that's interesting. You mentioned search, and I just would acknowledge that I had a conversation with Alex Smith at we both know him well, and he's a real star in the space, but he's the global search and AI product lead at I Manage. And I knew him back when he was at Reed Smith. So when he was at a law firm, and he has been having this conversation about practical use of emerging tools for many years and really is a leader in that space. And so I feel like you also are seeing the individuals who have been having this conversation much longer than the actual availability of generative AI, for example. And they're really good people to listen to because they have a frame of reference. And I like having those conversations. I really don't have any issue with having a conversation with people who are just eager to learn and who are enamored by the possibilities. But there was a really good cross exchange of ideas between people who are newer to the space and people who are applying long-standing experience. And that is also helpful. So I feel like there was like a moment, ILTA really hit a moment of this convergence of new and old experience and interest. And also as you say, we were all kind of eager and motivated to have that moment, right? It really worked out. I was glad to see it because I know that there have been timing issues over the years during the pandemic that didn't work out in terms of ILTACON. And I was really happy that they got this one.
The one that they had to go virtual. Obviously, there was
Well, there were just several of these, like everyone, they were pivoting and acting on the fly, and it was great. And I also want to just make a special note to thank Christine Becker and her team because they are the organizers of the fun run. And I think I heard there were something like 60 people. And every time somebody laughs, it says, who's getting up at 6 to be at a conference area at 6:30 or 6:15 to run? There were a lot of people and it was fun. It was a really nice day. And I just think that it was really nice. And she really, I know that there's a lot of effort. They make t-shirts. ILTA really goes all out and it's wonderful. So,
were you all in t-shirts when you were running?
I of course wore my ShareFile t-shirt.
Oh,
Yeah, because they were so generous to bring me there. But I wore my green ShareFile t-shirt, but everyone was having a great time and it was, wonderful way to build camaraderie. I also, of course, make a donation in honor of all the attendees in memory of my friend Alex Hannon to lung cancer research. So it's very meaningful for me personally. And my hope is always that someone else joins, but when 60 people show up,
That's incredible.
it's pretty
It's
fun.
awesome.
Yeah,
And
it's really nice.
Ari, and we have to talk about the microphone. So Ari bought us. We joked for our two listeners or three listeners that you'll know that we joked about having microphones, roving microphones at the conference, and Ari produced them. He said to me, "Did you buy microphones?" Knowing that I would not have. And I was like, "Oh no, such a shame I haven't." And he went, "Ta-da! A blue microphone."
Ah,
Pink microphone. We went with
yeah.
the kind of gender predictability. Ari had the blue one, I had the pink one. Pink
They
is my
only sold them that way.
and Ari only discovered today that you can actually use it as a karaoke microphone, which is what I've been doing ever since I got back from ILTA with my children, singing to Grease Lightning and other stuff. So it's actually been the funnest thing. But we got to go around and have photographs at the conference with some of the great and the good, and it injected. And Ari's been good at sharing this on LinkedIn, and it was so much fun. And that's actually, we talk about serious stuff, and it's important, and the dialogue, and I learned a lot. It was so helpful. I had so many really interesting briefings with people. And we should maybe talk about our level legal discussion, because that was one of my favorite things. But then this fun thing of roving around the conference with these microphones really, really made me laugh a lot.
Yeah, also the exhibit hall was pretty easy to navigate only because it was just in rows and there was great signage and people were willing to have conversations. I just feel like it was a very engaged group of people. I like the venue. I
Yeah.
think that being self-contained like that is pretty good. And in fact, you could have gone outside. There was a mall. The Grand Ole Opry was outside, but the
I went.
mall,
I
yeah.
went.
Oh, well,
I
there
saw.
you go.
I watched Post Malone with. I went with Gilo, which I don't know if you saw them. They were out in force. That was Sean Curran from Travis Smith has broken away, and he's created a new company called Gilo. He took a bunch of IT directors, and I was lucky enough to go along to watch Post Malone launch his country album, which was amazing. And in the Grand Old Opry, it was pretty incredible.
Yeah, there was a lot of Nashville. There were a lot of photographs about people going to concerts, which that was my very first experience in in Nashville was to see a group of songwriters at the Country Music Hall of Fame, and it was just extraordinary. Just
Yeah,
three songwriters on stage. It was really something special, and no, I liked it a lot. The microphone.
yeah.
So it was fun also to just to engage leaders not only in conversation, but I thought there were a lot of smiles, like a lot of fun. I feel like legal tech is in a moment also, like ILTA, and ILTA usually tracks that. And so it was, yeah, I thought it was a really meaningful event, and I was happy to be there.
So Level Legal did a discussion talking about, can you remember Steve Embry's first question? It was all around, won't be
I
surprised, it
don't
was all
remember that we got past the first question, but
we so what was how did he phrase it? Do you remember how he phrased the question? Because we had this really interesting hour-long debate
well,
around
so we should
AI.
just say that Level Legal has created a series of roundtable discussions where they
Mm,
bring together media like you, analysts like me, let's say, and leaders in the space from law firms and legal departments to have conversations about key issues. And Steve Embry and Joey Sieber is the CEO of Level Legal, and Steve Embry is a longtime practitioner and now analyst like me in the space, and they were facilitating this conversation in two tables, and it was very interesting. And I think Steve's first question had something to do with the deployment of AI in legal. I think it was some
should about the human element of
right,
of
right. Their theme
AI.
was making legal human,
Yeah.
and bringing out the humanity in an AI driven world, etc.
But it was so
And
interesting because we talked a lot. One of the things I enjoyed was we referenced so the keynote at ILTA was the first keynote, Dr. Hannah Fry, who's a mathematician and something of a celebrity in the UK and a great speaker, I have to say. So she talked for an hour, an incredible speaker, I think, but around being careful about data and being careful about trusting AI, being careful about trusting technology, full stop. She had some really funny examples, a lot of them that people will have heard before, like the tourist that followed the sat nav and drove across the sea, and some of them have, I mean, that one was funny, especially when there was a passing ship. But and some of them have been more tragic, right? Like they've driven off a cliff. And she was just saying about, and it was very relevant to now, you know, the way that she wove it in, you know, particularly as we're looking at hallucination and all kinds of stuff. And she's not an anti-tech person at all, but she was saying don't blindly trust any technology, and we always have to have our hands on the steering wheel. Actually, one of the examples that at level legal, that someone gave from, I think it was someone from Complex Discovery, said that they were an airline pilot in a previous career, and they talked about the normality of having you know, like the computer dropped, you know, flying the plane, autopilot, um, and that's been around for years, but that you could never just leave the plane leave the plane to fly and then go to sleep. Like we're obviously now seeing this with driverless cars, or you know, remote, like Tesla, etc. But with planes, they've done this for years and years, and you don't ever just leave the plane, and you're constantly aware of all of the different data and you're constantly paying attention. And actually, I thought that was a really great analogy for something that has been the case for many years. This is trusted technology, but he said, you know, it's just the same. You know, you have all of this data, but you have all, you know, you have this technology that you use, which is you know, a godsend, but actually you never just trust it blindly.
But then we did get into a conversation because it often turns from, can you use artificial intelligence to review a basic document with a handful of lines on it that you would trust pretty much anybody to do, whether they had legal experience and a license or not, to would you allow artificial intelligence to sentence your relative to be imprisoned for decades? It
Yeah.
always goes to the extremes. And so then we had this conversation about what are we talking about? Are we talking about using AI and e-discovery? Are we talking about using generative AI to generate a letter that doesn't have proprietary client information? Does AI practice like a first-year law student, or is it more like a partner that's been practicing for 30 years? And I think that was the most interesting and fun part of the conversation, because I think clearly we all agree that you can use a lot of these emerging technologies to review a single document or to replicate a very simple NDA, and you were unlikely to agree to use it for some extreme purpose that is always the bookend of the conversation. And I think Steve and Joey did a great job of just getting us excited and interested and moving through that conversation.
But the thing is, that was a really interesting part of the debate. When someone in the room was from the in-house community, and it's a case of also what are you comparing it with, right? So are you comparing? So for example, if you were using AI to review information that doesn't get reviewed already because they don't have the capacity. So in-house teams are already using triage systems in many cases where they don't
Yeah.
have capacity. So in some cases they'll just let the business deal with their own documents, or in some cases they'll just say, look, this is below a threshold in terms of value or complexity or whatever it might be, that just, we haven't got time to review. I've seen multiple teams doing this where the risk, it's like a risk assessment, right? They haven't got the capacity to review every single contract. So if you're comparing it to that, actually you're not really losing anything, right? Like if you're using technology to do a job that's not already being done, then you're really not losing anything at all. And I think this was a theme that has continued throughout both the conference and before and after, around what are you comparing. And you're not comparing like with like. So people that talk about hallucination and they talk about AI making mistakes or worse, they're actually comparing it with the 100% associate who never gets anything wrong. And I think these are all really interesting debates as well.
Right. Well, humans are flawed and that work product is flawed. And if you compare it to flawless, then you're not actually doing justice to this particular technology. But if you compare it to the reality, you may gain some advantage. And frankly, it also one of the things I felt like I saw at ILTACON was people who really had leveled up their skills to be able to have a conversation about something that people haven't been able to have a conversation about because it was too new. And so you were having realistic discussions about practical applications and and skills that are necessary to optimize how these things are used. And so I feel like I connected with a lot of people who had themselves gone through a transformation to be able to take what they knew and the experience that they had and apply it to this new era that is here or that is coming for sure. And that was also great to see. I love to see that. I wrote a book called The Opportunity Maker. I wrote another book called Reinventing Professional Services. I mean, I deeply believe in figuring out how to take what you know and morphing it so that it can constantly improve and create new opportunities as you move forward. And when I saw that and heard that, I just felt like, wow, people are really embracing this. They're not embracing the hype, they're embracing the reality that knowing more and being more adept and capable is going to drive us all forward. It's going to raise the level of the conversation and the use of whatever's coming, and it's coming rapidly, fast and furious.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, and I think that's why it's nice to see each other. I think it's exhausting. I think people are really exhausted. I think that we sit behind our desk and we're inundated with, depending on what your job is, for us, it'll be, for me particularly, it'll be press releases, information, new people wanting to talk about this solution and that solution. And, you have to pick up the phone or jump on Teams or whatever it might be and try and talk to people. And I think that's why it's so great for people to be face to face, because it's exhausting sometimes doing this stuff on your own. Whereas when you're face to face, it's just that ideas exchange. And I'm thinking that, I'd like to, it made me realize I need to do this more, get out more, make sure I'm communicating with people enough. And getting that energy, I suppose it depends on the person you are and how you get your energy. I love being around people. I know some people find it very tiring, but yeah, it made me realize, that right now that constant conversation is really important.
Yeah, I also like the timing change of ILTA. ILTA used to be a little bit later in the summer in August, and it moved to earlier middle of the month. And I thought that was helpful. I didn't feel like people needed to rush away, although schools start certainly in some parts of this country in that middle August period. But I like that too. So I'm glad that we all had a chance to do that. And I'm curious to see what the follow-up will be. Any follow-up for you in terms of what's next after ILTACON?
Yeah, COVID. Everyone got COVID. That's not my follow-up, sorry, but it is true. Um,
Well, we didn't get COVID.
I didn't. I must admit, I didn't test, and I haven't seen anyone that would be vulnerable. So I don't have tests, and we weren't sick. So, but I did hear a lot about lots of people getting it. But what's the follow-up? Yeah, like some really practical stuff. So some of the briefings were around. I'm just writing a piece about I manage working with Allens in Australia on co-authoring. Some like not necessarily, I think we're not going for these big my favorite things are not necessarily the big earth-shattering announcements, but the really practical solutions that people are taking forward, right? That might be that will be really significant in terms of creating efficiencies. That's just one example, because obviously with co-authoring you then need to check in, check out less, in terms of information governance, all sorts of things. It's creates efficiency. We use it in my organization. It's something that law firms haven't really, is my understanding. And so things like this, these kind of really important, perhaps more granular changes that people are working on. For me, those, and I've got more. I've still got, to be honest with you, it's been so busy, and this is part of the issue that I face on a week to week basis, but that I've still got other things that I'm working on. But what about you? What's your key takeaways?
One of the questions I asked during my session on this reimagining your legal workflow, which was standing room only. Just it was, and I don't attribute that anything to me. I think that the teams there did a great job, and it was at a good time. But I asked people, how many people here are an army of one? how many people are in their own IT department? And lots of people's, hands went up. And then I asked questions about how many people are fewer than three, fewer than five. And regardless of firm sizes, in many cases or company sizes, there are individuals, small groups of teams that are responsible for different pockets of IT or the whole thing.
Mm.
And, they were there for very practical reasons. I
Yeah.
need to figure out how I can do 125% of the job as a single person in IT, or how my team and
Mm.
I can do 500% between the three of us. And what does that look like? And how can we continue to help our firms grow and elevate their practices and not create a continued imbalance of work and outside of work? And I think that was people were there to come up with really practical and strategic ways of helping their firms
Yeah.
create competitive advantages with technology. And I hopefully they found those, but I think there were lots of ideas, and I'm looking forward to, like you, sharing them.
I think one of the things that we're going to see more of, and we started to see it at ILTA, was the sort of more use of agent technology. So whereas before, obviously, we've used Gen AI for a task, you've given it a task, and then it will give you an output, and it will verify its sources, all that kind of stuff. With agent technology, of Net Documents announced one of their sort of new ND Max Assist, which uses agent technology, so you're able to create a workflow, a proper workflow. This is going to be really exciting. There was a post-ILTA announcement from Spellbook where they've launched this Gen AI assistant using agent technology. So you can create an entire workflow, whereas rather than just a specific task, you can create, so for example, you can get a term sheet and you can ask it to populate different documents with information from the term sheet. This is really big stuff, right? This is the next wave, and I think we're going to start talking about that more. So it'd be interesting to see how much that comes up in the next few months.
Well, Caroline Hill, a privilege as always. I'm looking forward to continuing this conversation,
Yeah.
and thank you so much for joining me and including me in this wonderful episode of Charting Change in Legal.
Thanks, Ari. Thanks, everyone.